This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ping.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Dr. Anne Marie Evers Show. The doctor is in the house. Do 2 affirmations and call me in the morning. Change your life one new thought at a time. Make your dreams come true. Attract that lasting, loving relationship. Successful career. Radiant health and abundant wealth. Tune in to the Dr. Anne Marie Evers Show and learn positive ways to get what you want on www.contacttalkradio.com.
And welcome to the Dr. Anne Marie Evers Show, where dreams really can and do come true. And every time I say that, I laugh because I say it so many times that I can say it in my sleep. Anyhow, welcome to the show, folks. And today we have a very exciting guest on. He was on last week, and some people raised some questions, and I think it's interesting. And my special guest is Garnet Schulhauser, and he's a retired lawyer, and he now lives near Victoria, and with his wife Kathy and little dog Abby. And he practiced law in Calgary for over 30 years, I think 34 years, and then he retired in 2008. And his first book was the one we talked about last time, and that was Dancing on a Stamp, and that was published in 2012. And since the release of that book, he's been active with book signing tours and speaking engagements, and has been a frequent guest on radio and talk shows. And in Dancing on a Stamp, the book called that, Garnet recounts how his life changed dramatically one day when he was confronted on the street by a homeless man named Albert, who was actually a wise spirit in disguise, a mission emissary from the spirit world. This seemingly chance encounter launched a provocative dialogue with Albert, who disclosed startling new truths about cycle of reincarnation on Earth and how we create our own reality through pre-birth planning and free will actions. And then his second book, Dancing Forever with Spirit, and this is one of the, we're going to be talking about some of the information there, describes his next encounter with Albert, who guided him on a series of astral adventures to visit the spirit side. And then the third book he's written, which is the Dance of Heavenly Bliss. In this book, he continues the saga of his astral trips with Albert, who takes him to meet Gaia, G-A-I-A, the consciousness of Mother Earth, 2 of Earth's mythical creatures, Sasquatch and Irish Fairy. That's quite a combination, who live in fear of humans and human civilization on other planets that are very different from our own. On the spirit side, he met many fascinating souls who regaled him with tales of their lives on Earth, including Moses, Jesus, and his mother Mary, Lucifer, and goddess Athena. These trips were designed to inspire humans to appreciate the diversity of life in the universe and encourage us to love and respect one another, Mother Earth, and all the creatures who share our planet. That's quite a bit said, isn't it? And welcome to the show, Garnet.
Well, thank you, Anne-Marie. Thank you for having me.
Yes, we had a wonderful time last week, didn't we, talking about lots of things. And now are you going to mention a little bit about your second book that you wrote?
Yeah, Dancing Forever with Spirit was my second book, and it was my first sort of set of astral trips with my spirit guide, Albert. How that started was that I was asleep in my bed, and I woke up, I heard a sound or whatever, and I noticed this ghost-like ethereal figure standing in the doorway of my bedroom. And when it moved closer to me, I could see it was my spirit guide, Albert, except now he was in astral form. And he said to me, I'm going to take you on a series of astral trips to the spirit side and other places in the universe because I want you to write about what you see and hear in your second book. And so then he literally pulled my astral body out of my physical body, and we rose up through the ceiling, up through the clouds, and away we went on our first trip, which was through a shimmering doorway to the spirit side. So that was the beginning of my second set of encounters with Albert, which were a series of astral trips.
Now tell me, Garnet, were you any fear at all?
No, I was a bit apprehensive because I'd never traveled astrally before, and I wasn't quite sure what to expect. But Albert was, he's a very, I was quite used to him by now, and he's a very kind, compassionate, wise soul, and so I felt very comfortable with him. And then sort of once I sort of got my feet wet in the astral plane, so to speak, then it was all seemed very easy. And I just followed Albert. He guided me. He was my tour guide, so it went quite well.
Oh, lovely. So now tell us about that trip.
Yeah, well, the first we went to the spirit side, and I had a wonderful reunion with my family, that deceased relatives who had already passed on, and then we had a visit with the Council of Wise Ones, and I think I relayed the message they gave to me in the last show, and then from there, Albert took me off, and we went. First of all, we went off to a beautiful planet many light years from Earth, a planet he called Proteus, which was looked a lot like Earth, except it was entirely covered in water. So it had blue water and white clouds and so on, but there were no land masses. It was entirely covered in water. And so
no people, no human, no, not human beings, but no beings at all.
Oh yes, yeah, there were. We dropped not land beings because there's no land, but we dropped down below the ocean and surface, and there the sea life, like the sea life and the plants, and everything else, looked very much like the undersea world of Earth. Looked almost identical. And so there I met up with a humpback whale and a dolphin. They looked exactly like our humpback whales and dolphins, and we communicated by telepathy. They said to me that they said that they communicated with their kin, their cousins on Earth through telepathy, even though it was many light years away. They had contact with the dolphins and whales on Earth, and they said that they didn't like what they were hearing from their cousins on Earth, but before that they said to me, if the undersea world of Proteus looks a lot like the undersea world of Earth, it's because most of the sea life that you find under the oceans in Earth was originally seeded from Proteus, so that's why they look so very the same, and that's why we have dolphins and whales just like they have on Proteus.
Well, they've always said, haven't they, that dolphins are very intelligent.
Yes, and clearly this dolphin, and in fact the whale, was extremely intelligent, very, very empathetic, sensitive, kind beings, and they really wanted to. Yeah, they're very extremely intelligent because they could communicate by telepathy, but most humans can't. And so they said the contact with their cousins on Earth. They got the message that the dolphins and whales on Earth were very unhappy at the abuse they'd been suffering at the hands of humans over the centuries, being hunted with harpoons and caught in traps and nets and imprisoned in water parks, and they really, and their cousins there said, look, we just want to live in peace and harmony with humans. We want to live in peace and harmony with all the other creatures on Earth, on our planet, and we don't understand why humans continue to abuse us. And we really wish that they would stop so that we could just get along and live together, in peace. And so that was their message. They're very upset at the way humans had been abusing them, not only by direct violence, but by polluting their oceans with our pollution. And so it was a message that they said, can I take this back to the humans on Earth to say, look at, dolphins and whales are very intelligent, very sensitive creatures, and we should treat them with dignity and respect.
Yes. And did you feel love coming from them too?
I'm sorry?
Did you feel love coming from them?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, they're very loving creatures. There's no, they love each other. They love the other creatures on their planet, and nothing but love for me. So they weren't being hostile. They just really wanted me to take a message back to my fellow humans so that we could treat their cousins on Earth with more love and respect.
That's wonderful, yeah. Now, there was one I was wondering about. You mentioned a meeting with Gaia, Gaia. Am I saying that correct?
A lot of people, yeah, you can do it either way. A lot of people refer to it as Gaia.
Gaia, okay. Yeah. And she's the consciousness of Mother Earth. What does that actually mean, the consciousness of Mother Earth?
Well, it really means that Earth is not just a bunch of inert molecules, that there is a consciousness, a living entity that encompasses our planet, and Gaia is really the consciousness of our planet. So a lot of people find that hard to believe, but that's the way it happened. I had a conversation with her in one of my astral trips with Albert, and this is in my third book, actually, on Dance of Heavenly Bliss, and we Albert took me to the North Pole of our planet. We dropped down through the ice pack and down through the sea level floor, and there in a cavern, all of a sudden I find myself having a conversation with somebody who says that she is Gaia, the consciousness of Mother Earth, and so it was quite amazing to me. But she's a very very intelligent, loving, caring entity who's fiercely protective of all of her flora and fauna on her planet. She wants all her animals, all her creatures to live in peaceful harmony, to get along, and not not disturb sort of the atmosphere, not disturb the biosphere that she has created for all of her creatures.
Where do you think? Just my question. Where do you think these energies come from?
Well, everything originally is derived from the source, the creator. We all get our energies from the creator. We're all connected to the creator. So she is just one of the source's entities whose job it is to sort of look after planet Earth, and so that's her role. So
is that like some people call, universal mind, God, whoever, but there's some creator that created all these different entities for different reasons to keep everything in place?
Everything's created by the creator. The creator created everything in the universe, all the planets and stars and everything else, as well as all the living creatures. And there are differences in the creatures. And so there's Gaia, who looks after our planet. There's spirit souls like you and I who have incarnated on Earth. There's angels. There's all kinds of different entities that are created by the source for very specific reasons usually, and because of that, we're all still connected to the source, and we're all connected to each other. We have that connection even though we don't realize it.
Yes, that's true. But now, what does Maya think? Daya, what does she think of what's going on the planet right now?
Well, she's very upset, and she's very upset because humans have become like an invasive weed that has taken over somebody's garden, and we're squishing out life around us. We're abusive to her other creatures, to her other animals in many, many ways, and we pollute the environment. We dump poisons into the oceans and the rivers, and toxic fumes into the atmosphere, and chemicals onto her soil. She's very unhappy about this, and she said, before humans came along, or even at the early stages of human civilization, before we were very advanced, we didn't really cause any pollution or any wreak much havoc with the other creatures. But since the Industrial Revolution, we've really upped our ability to pollute Mother Earth, which we have done sort of without much regard for where we live. And she's very unhappy about this. And she said, look, to be frank, she said, planet Earth would be better off without humans. But she doesn't have any grudge against humans. She just really wants us to clean up our act, to change our ways, stop abusing her other creatures, and stop polluting Mother Earth. That's what she really wants us to do, and she really wants us to get that message. And she said, look, if we continue on the track we're on now, things could end very badly for humanity unless we really change our ways. So her very strong message to me to take back to other humans in my books is to, change your ways, humans, because it could end very badly for you. And the interesting thing is she said that she has actually a power to fight back to some degree with what's going on. And she has the power to sort of increase the number and intensities of natural disasters that occur on planet Earth, like hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, volcanoes, droughts, floods, and so on. And she's been doing this with increasing frequency over the last while, and that's it's a wake-up call, a warning shot across our bow, basically to say, look, unless you change your ways, these things are going to get worse and worse. And I think we've all noticed over the last 5-10 years that there's been crazy things happening with our climate and our weather.
Everything, yeah.
And so that's just that's our wake-up call. We're supposed to pay attention to that and change our ways and really make it an about face, stop polluting the planet and treat her other creatures with dignity and respect and stop abusing them. So that's her very powerful message to humans.
Now, just in words that, how can people do that? What can we, you and I and the people are listening, what can we do to create this? Are we helpless, or what can we do? Have you got some ways that we could do it, or did she share some ways?
She didn't really give me any specific ways, but of course, it just, my discussions with Albert, he says, you have to start, one person at a time. So first of all, stop polluting to the extent you can, recycle things, and then try to convince your neighbors and your friends and your coworkers to do the same. And then talk to the people who run the country. Send emails to the leaders, the politicians. Send them letters. Try to if you get enough people sort of petitioning the people who run the countries, eventually they're going to get the message. It may take a while, but eventually they will. So that it's a matter of just spreading the message, and you have to sort of take one step at a time, one individual at a time, and then just have it spread out, have it ripple out to catch all the people. And we are doing some good things. Like we're much better at curbing our pollution now than we were, say, 20 years ago.
We are, yes.
But we still have a ways to go, and it's really a matter of awareness. And I think that the more people are aware of it, the better we can all become.
Yes, I agree with that. And, it's good that we're talking about this because people need to be aware of it, don't they?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Now, in your second book, what would you like to share about the second book?
Well, one of the more interesting trips was I had a visit with Albert to our planet in a higher dimension, which a lot of people refer to as the New Earth. And it's our planet, but it's at a much higher vibrational rate, so it's in a higher dimension. And he took me there because basically I was sort of despondent at sort of the state of affairs with our humanity and in our ability to raise our vibrations. And he said the ultimate goal for all of us is to raise our vibrations so that we can basically ascend to a higher dimension, to Earth in a higher dimension.
Well, so did you go to that place?
Yeah, I did. We did go there, and it was really amazingly a wonderful place, an idyllic society. I met there with the descendants of a group of humans that had lived on our old Earth eons ago in Central America, and they had managed to, in the face of a barbarian army that was encroaching on their territory, their leaders had managed to tap into spirit, and they found a way to do basically a mass ascension from all this group up into the new Earth. So I met with their descendants, and it's an amazing place. There's no crime. There's no negative emotions. Everyone loves everyone else. There's no need to work. There's no money. They all get supplied everything they want to by the state, basically. They've learned to slow down the aging process. They've learned to protect themselves from diseases, and they've learned to repair injured tissues. So basically, they all live for several hundred years.
Wow.
And it's a very peaceful, very idyllic society. And the people there are just free to pursue knowledge or recreational activities or whatever they feel like, with no obligation to work or none of this sort of 9-to-5 stuff that we all have to deal with.
Well, did they look the same as people on Earth?
I'm sorry.
Did they look the same as the people on Earth?
Yes, yeah, they look like humans, absolutely.
And what was it like? Was it like nice weather, green grass, or what was?
Oh yeah, no. Well, it was very beautiful green grass, meadows. A very nice little city I was in that wasn't very elaborate. They didn't have any sort of the apparent technology that we do. Like they didn't spend their time watching TVs or staring at the smartphones or computers, kind of thing. They didn't need that. So it was very sort of a pastoral kind of society, but very peaceful, beautiful, and there was none of the bad stuff that exists on our planet was there. Really, it was just a very beautiful.
Yeah, well, I remember when I was a kid, my mom used to sing the song "The Holy City." It sounds sort of like that in a way.
Yeah, and it really does exist, and all of us can get there. Albert says we just have to raise our vibrations to match the higher vibrations of the new Earth, and we can go there.
And how do we raise? By thinking differently, acting differently?
Yes. Basically, we have to stifle our negative emotions like fear, anger, hate, greed, and fully embrace love and compassion. And once we do that, our vibrations will just automatically rise up, and we can ascend to the new Earth. So that's easy to say, not so easy to do, because we all have occasions where our negative emotions flare up, and it's it's not easy to curb them, but that's something we have to do.
Well, I guess when you really consider, we are human, aren't we? In this part, in the Earth, and we do have these negative things happen all around us, and I think that you really have to be aware of that. That's why I teach positive affirmations and positive thinking, and that is a way of raising your energy, isn't it? Raising your vibration.
Absolutely. Yeah. Positive thinking, positive affirmations—they're all good because they all raise your vibrations, and it's a matter of working at it hard enough to get your vibrations up, and then away you go. And there have been a lot of humans that have made the ascension other than the group that I saw.
Really? That's incredible. Well, now, is there anything more of the second book you want to talk about before we go to Dance of Heavenly Bliss?
Sure. Yeah. One of the things that I'd like to just mention from my second book is that, I'd mentioned to Albert that I really wondered about miracles. Like, did miracles really happen? Like, if you read the Bible, of course, Jesus and Moses and some of the people, they all had performed what seemed to be miracles. Walking on water,
yes,
turning water into wine.
Yeah.
And he said, well, yeah, those things did happen, but it wasn't because God was sort of manipulating things and creating the miracles. He said, for example, Jesus, he was a master soul. He created his miracles because he learned to focus his thoughts into very powerful beams of energy. So he tapped into the energy of the universe, and that's how he could manipulate matter and do what he did. So it was he who created those miracles. It wasn't God or the source who was doing it for him. And he said, basically everyone's thoughts are like waves of energy. And when you have a thought, it sort of fans out and affects other mass and energy in the universe. And so if we can learn to focus our thoughts, really focus and bear down on them, like Jesus did, then we can manipulate matter just like he did. But most of us our thinking is too scattered. We don't focus enough. Our thinking is sort of like the beam of light from a flashlight compared to the focused beam from a laser beam, which obviously is much more powerful. So
that's true. Yes, I know. You take a magnifying glass outside, and if it's hot enough, and you have it over a newspaper, and you keep it, you keep it steady, it would burn. But if you move it around, it won't. So I think the focus is very important.
Absolutely, yeah. And so it's a good lesson. He basically said if humans learn to use more than 10% of their brains, which is all we do, and learn to focus our thoughts, then we can do all those things that Jesus and Moses and the other people did.
That's incredible, isn't it? Have you mastered that yet?
I have not. I wish I did, Marie, but I'm still struggling at the bottom of the.
I watched an interview you did when you first started, and I found it really interesting. And it was one on the YouTube the other day.
Oh yeah.
Yes, and you've done a lot more. You've done 2 more books since then, which that's after you just did your one book.
Yeah, the first book. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you said it was your first interview on that book too.
Oh, it may have been. That's a long time ago.
Yeah, it was quite a while ago. Yeah. So anyway, now I don't want to run out of time here. Now, anything more from the other book before I move on to? I got some questions about the Heavenly Bliss, the third one.
I think we should move on to the third one.
Okay. Now, I thought you mentioned that you had an encounter with a Sasquatch and an Irish fairy, and I read that when I first started. Now, can you tell us about that? There's quite a combination, isn't it?
Yeah, it was 2 separate visits. They weren't together.
Oh, they weren't.
Yeah. So the first time was it was in the Pacific Northwest of America, and in a sort of a meadow in a secluded forest. And there I met with a Sasquatch. Her name was Xana. She was about 9 feet tall. Her hair, very muscular body, covered in dark brown hair, with sort of an ape-like head. And we communicated by telepathy. And she said, "Look, Sasquatches are real. We've been coexisting with humans, for eons on all the continents except Antarctica. But we're very careful to avoid contact with humans because we think humans are violent and aggressive. And we think that if we make contact with them, we're all going to end up either being poked and prodded in a laboratory or shot and killed or paraded around as a freak show. And so they're very concerned that they're very careful to avoid contact with humans."
Isn't that interesting? I never heard that concept before.
Yeah, and so she says that they communicate by telepathy, and they're very intelligent, sensitive, empathetic creatures. Their desire is just to live in peace and harmony with humans and all the other creatures, but they're just afraid that if they make open contact that isn't going to happen. So they avoid contact. They live in underground cities, come out at night, and they're very adept at avoiding humans because they have what she called sort of like an animal-sensitive radar, and they can detect humans from several miles away. So that's how they're being able to avoid contact with us. They got this animal-sensitive radar.
Built-in radar almost.
Yeah, it is, and that's why they can avoid us. And occasionally they've been spotted by people, and occasionally they leave a footprint in the mud. But most of the time they're pretty careful about avoiding it and avoiding contact. And her lament to me was, "Hey, we just want to live in peace and harmony with you guys. can you please change your ways, discard your violent ways so that we feel comfortable coming out and living openly with you. And that was her plea to me to take back to my fellow humans.
Well, you are taking it back. Now, what about the Irish Ferry?
Well, the Irish Ferry was, Albert took me to Ireland, and we dropped down there in a very pretty meadow, secluded, nobody was around. And out from behind a bush, Albert brings this cute little lady, a fairy. Her name was Brina. She was about 3 feet tall. She looked like a tiny, perfect china doll. And she was one of the fabled little people of Ireland, some people call little people or leprechauns or whatever. And she says that they used to roam, they now live in underground cities, hiding from humans like the Sasquatch because they think that we're violent and aggressive. Before humans arrived on Ireland, on that island, they lived openly, above ground, and they had a wonderful time. When humans arrived on the island, they thought that we were just larger versions of themselves. But they soon found out that we weren't. We're violent and aggressive, and so they went into hiding, and they've been in hiding ever since, just like the Sasquatch are. And they communicate by telepathy, and they're very sensitive, intelligent, warm, loving creatures, and they really just want to live in peace and harmony with us as well. And so just like the Sasquatch, they're saying, humans, why can't you change your ways? We don't want to harm you, and we don't want to be harmed by you, so can you please just be kind and gentle and let us live openly above ground so that we can once again frolic in the sunlight. And that was so very similar message from two different fabled creatures that a lot of people say don't exist, but they really do.
Yes. Now, the fairy, did they have wings? No.
No, didn't have wings, no.
No wings. And where was that? Where you met them? Where in Ireland?
That was in Ireland, yeah.
What part of Ireland?
I don't know. I don't.
He didn't say exactly where.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. Albert didn't tell me exactly where it was. We just sort of quickly dropped down and because we're in Ireland. So
you're on your way. You were going.
Yeah.
Now, what about this? I understand you found a society, a human society ruled by women. Tell us about that.
Oh yeah, that was an interesting experience. I had asked Albert if at one point if human civilization existed on other planets besides Earth. And he said, yes, there are a number of planets. So he said, I'll show you one, very interesting one, different take on society. So we went to this planet, and it was a very modern sort of developed, society. They had like futuristic cities, like with flying cars and moving walkways and all kinds of things that you might see from a science fiction movie. And so we went there, and I met with the reigning empress called Marpesia. And she was sort of the overall ruler of their society, elected by the vote of all women. She said they have a matriarchal society, that men are not allowed to vote. They're not allowed to hold positions of power or authority. They're not allowed really to do much that can affect their society. Everything is done by women. And she says that, the men, even though they can't, have responsible jobs or vote or, take part in the management of the society, she says they're not subjugated or abused, that they're free to sort of pursue recreational and sports and artistic endeavors, and they're actually quite happy. And the reason that they got there or they have their society is so matriarchal is because all male children at the age of 3 are chemically sterilized. So the testosterone level is way down, and that's what makes the men so docile and deferential. And they're quite happy to have the women run the society because they just think that's the natural way of things, and they don't really care about it.
I guess they've never known any difference.
Never known any difference, yeah. And she says that a long time ago they had been a patriarchal society like Earth, ruled by men who were cruel and abusive to the women. And then one night, one of the women had a vision in a dream where she was told that there's a certain plant in the forest that if fed to the men would drastically reduce their testosterone levels. So she secretly, gathered up this plant, spread the word to other women. They fed it to their men, and gradually, over a period of a few years, the men all just took a back seat, and the women took over, and it's been that way ever since.
Wow!
So it was, and they had it was a wonderful society. They had no crime,
no jealousy.
No, they respected each other. And I said, don't you sometimes have differences in the ruling council about how to govern things? And she said, yeah, we do sometimes, but we always settle things peacefully. There's no violence. There's no fighting. It was just a very sort of peaceful, harmonious society. It worked for them. And I said to Albert after, I said, That's certainly one way of running a society, but it's too bad there wasn't a happy medium between that extreme and the extremes of our society, where men and women could be truly equal.
That's what I was thinking too.
And that's where we really should try to go. But it was just an example of sort of a 180-degree, opposite from our patriarchal society.
On here, yes. Yeah. And how do you say Akashic record?
Akashic
record. Yeah, you got to view the building of Stonehenge, didn't you?
Yeah, and we went to the Akashic records, which is the Akashic records have the records of every life that's ever been lived anywhere in the universe. So they have all of my past lives there, all of your past lives, and everyone. And so Albert took me there, and the purpose was to show me one of my past lives, which related to the building of Stonehenge. And it was I was a Druid priest about 3000 BC, living on the Salisbury Plain of England, where Stonehenge is. And as I'm watching this in the Akashic records, I could see that in that life I had a vision, a dream, in which I was told to go to a certain part of the plain early one morning and wait for events to unfold. And so I did. And then I noticed a spaceship coming down, landing, not far from me. Out of the spaceship came a large human. He was 8 feet tall, but he looked like a human in every other respect. He said his name was Mogons, and he was from a different star system. And he came and he said that he wanted me to enlist the help of the villagers to build a navigational beacon for him. And he had very detailed plans that he spread out on a parchment. And so I enlisted the help of the villagers, and with the help of some very technically advanced tools. He had like a laser cutting tool, and he had an anti-gravity wand. And so with the help of these, the villagers were able to cut precise sort of blocks of stone from special quarries, and then transport them with the anti-gravity wand to this place on the Salisbury Plain. And together they put these stones in place, which we now know as Stonehenge.
Wow.
And he said it was a navigational beacon to help ships navigate when they were in warp drive, interstellar ships. So when the thing was all built, he put a power box in the center, and then he went away, and the thing was operating as a navigational beacon. And then a couple hundred years later, he came back, retrieved the power box because the beacon was no longer needed. And the villagers never knew the actual purpose of Stonehenge, and they used it for religious and ceremonial purposes. And and over the years, some of the stones got knocked down, and what we have now is what you see today. But it was amazing to watch how it was built.
Yeah. Wow. And so that within your past life, though.
Yeah, that was.
Of course.
Yeah, that was because I had a role in that because I was the Druid priest that he had made contact with. Yeah.
Now, can you tell us about the human civilization that lived among the dinosaurs when you went up to the record place?
Yes, that was another interesting scene that I saw in the Akashic records. Is Albert said that the Earth has had many human civilizations, many of which sort of perished in the past. Some of the notable ones were like Lemuria and Atlantis that rose up to great heights and then crashed and burned. But he said that there were some that were existing and sort of got lost in as part of history through no fault of their own. And he took me back to the Akashic records. We saw a human civilization that lived among the dinosaurs, which most archaeologists and anthropologists say humans haven't been around that long, but they were just wrong. So this civilization lived among the dinosaurs, and they had quite a nice society. They didn't have any technology, but the men and women shared everything equally. They shared the child rearing and cleaning and cooking and hunting duties, so they're very egalitarian sort of society. And what happened was that through no fault of their own, when the asteroid hit the Yucatan Peninsula, throwing up a bunch of dust and smoke and causing volcanic eruptions all around the world, that ended up with basically a nuclear winter, blocked out the sun for a number of years. Most of the dinosaurs perished, and this particular civilization, the human one, was buried under a couple 100 feet of lava, which is why nobody's found it yet. But it just showed you that humans have been around a lot longer than we suspect they have been.
Well, what did the humans look like in those? Did they say, were they tall? Were they like...
They were about the same as us. There wasn't much difference. Obviously, they had more primitive clothing, but they look very much like the humans, today. And so they they had a very nice civilization, which unfortunately got wiped out. Otherwise, it may have spread to other places on the planet, and maybe today we would be different than we are now. Don't know.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. Now, we're going to go for a short break, and we'll be right back after the short break with more from my special guest, Garnet Schulhauser, and he's talking about something that is very interesting, and some folks, I'm sure, will find it a little far out, but let's keep an open mind, folks. So we'll be right back after the break.
When was the last time you read a book that has created a profound impact on your life? This book is touching deep into the hearts of readers worldwide and empowering people with new hope to conquer over a life of despair, loneliness, and sadness. This book is called Affirmations, Your Passport to Happiness by Dr. Anne-Marie Evers. In this book, you'll learn the power of affirmations, creating visualization, goal setting, positive thinking, self-esteem, learn how to attract the perfect, lasting, successful career, relationship, and have optimal health. To order your copy, log on to www.affirmations-doctor.com or email Anne-Marie Evers at shore.ca and get your passport to happiness. Affirmations, Your Passport to Happiness, the book that's giving people positive control over their lives once again.
And welcome back to the Dr. Anne-Marie Evers Show, and talking with my special guest, Garnet Schulhauser. And I wanted to ask you to, I think you told me on the spirit side you had a meeting with Jesus Christ and Adolf Hitler. Now, you didn't meet them at the same time, did you?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Oh, you did? Oh, please tell us about that meeting and what you learned.
Well, it was one of my trips to the spirit side, and Albert said to me, sort of surprised me, he said, I'm going to take you to meet a couple people that you really should meet and speak to. He said one was a paragon of virtue, and the other one was an evil monster, and I couldn't imagine at the time who I was going to meet, but we saw two individuals sitting on a bench in the middle. As I got closer, I could see that one was Jesus Christ dressed in a white robe, and the other was Adolf Hitler in his military uniform. And the two of them were sitting there on the same bench having a very amicable conversation. And so Albert took me up there, and he introduced me to them. And the fellow who looked like Adolf Hitler, he soon morphed back into what he referred to as his natural form on the spirit side, which was a handsome young man named David. And he said, yes, that he had his last incarnation on earth, he had been Adolf Hitler. And he said that he was very sorry for all the horrible things he had done, very, very upset with himself. But he said, it's water under the bridge. I can't change what's happened. But he said, I'm resolved to go back to earth and in another incarnation and try to make amends for all the evil I had caused during my last life on earth. And he said, one of the surprising things was he said that since crossing back over to the spirit side, he has met with many of the souls who were victims of his death camps, and there's been total reconciliation. And there's nothing but unconditional love between them and the soul who was Hitler. And he said that just shows you that whatever happens on earth, it basically stays there except for some of the memories that you've created. And when you get back to the spirit side, you have no desire for revenge. You don't hate the person who harmed you. It's totally different. You sort of what happened on earth sort of stays there. And he said a lot of people find that hard to swallow, hard to accept, but that's just the way it is on the spirit side. So very interesting conversation with him. And then Jesus was saying, nodding his head and smiling, and he said, yes, Matthew and I meet together quite often to discuss our lives on earth, even though it's like oil and water, 180-degree polar opposites. And he said that he incarnated on earth at the request of the Council of Wise Ones because they felt that humanity needed a sort of a bit of a lift to sort of help them move up the path to spiritual enlightenment. So he incarnated. He was a master soul, as I'd mentioned, and so he could create miracles by focusing his thoughts into powerful beams of energy. And so that's how he created his miracles. He did that because he wanted to attract attention. He wanted to gain more followers and have more people listen to his message, which really is one of love, hope, and compassion. That's what he was spreading.
Love, hope, and compassion.
Yeah, that's what he wanted humans to embrace. And that's why he he preached and he did his miracles and gathered his followers. I said to him, well, if you could create miracles, perform miracles, why did you let yourself be crucified on the cross? And he said that he could have prevented that, but he thought that his death on the cross and then subsequent resurrection would make a much more dramatic statement for his followers, and that it would hopefully gather more followers to his teachings. So that's why he did it. And he said that, he assumed and hoped that his disciples and his followers would form a religion based upon his teachings, and they did. And so the core teachings are good, he said, but a lot of the times the religious holy men have sort of gone off track, following their own agendas to assume and acquire power and control, and so they haven't sort of purely followed what he was preaching, but they sort of formed a lot of sort of peripherals around his teachings, a lot of rules and a lot of regulations which didn't come from him, but he said that's just humanity, that's just how things develop on our planet.
Yes. Now, and then too, I'm just wondering though, how these two people could be sitting together on the bench. It was because there's unconditional love all around, and
yes,
and they don't carry anger or anything over there.
No, there's no carryover of hatred or need for revenge or anything else, and so that's why Hitler, who was such an evil person, could be over there. Everyone loves him unconditionally. Jesus loves him unconditionally, and vice versa. So it's just a very different way of looking at things. And here on Earth, we think that if somebody does us harm or somebody kills us, that boy, we'd really like to have revenge. But the fact is that if you're murdered here and you go back to the spirit side, when your perpetrator is on the spirit side, you don't really want to enact revenge against them. You don't hate them. You actually unconditionally love them, which may seem strange, but that's just the way it works. Is that hatred, revenge, and those sort of negative emotions, they stay on Earth. They don't carry over to the spirit side.
Yeah, well, unconditional love, is that different than the love we have on Earth, though?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's possible to have unconditional love on Earth, but most of the time there's conditions. Most of the time when we love somebody, there's an expectation of something in return, or there's an expectation that I'm only going to love people who I judge to be worthy of my love. And so there's always seemingly strings attached to our love, whereas on the spirit side, unconditional love is you love everyone and you don't expect anything in return, and you don't care what they've done in the past, and you don't have any judgment for them. It's just pure love.
Pure love. Wow.
Yeah.
Now, can you please give us your contact? We got so into conversation, I forgot to ask you for your contact information, so folks that are listening can find you and find out more.
Absolutely. The best source of information about me and my books is my website, which is garnetschulhauser.com. That's hard to remember, but if they Google Dancing on a Stamp or the title of any of my books, they can get to my website. And there you can find information about my books. You can download a free excerpt. You can watch a book video. You can even listen to the recordings of all of my previous radio shows. You can access that on my website. This is radio show number 127 for me.
127. What was the last one? 126, right?
Yeah.
Last week, right?
Yeah, this is 127. And so and there's buy links on my website where you can just click on it and get to Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all the online bookstores and get right to where you can buy my books. And my email address is there. It's contact@garnetschulhauser.com, and so I welcome comments and questions from your listeners.
And will you spell your last name, please?
Sure, Schulhauser.
And the titles of the books, folks, are Dancing on a Stamp, Dancing Forever with Spirit, Dance of Heavenly Bliss. And right now we're talking about his third book, which is Dance of Heavenly Bliss. Now, on one of your trips to the spirit side, you met one of your guardian angels. Can you tell us about and what you learned from the angels? And the angels aren't male or female, are they?
No, they don't. Well, actually, nobody on the spirit side has a gender. Excuse me. But people can choose to appear in the form of a male or female. Did
this one appear in the form of a lady, female?
Yeah, as a female angel. Yeah, her name was Anna Peel, and she was appeared to me as a very strikingly beautiful lady, and very kind, gracious, compassionate. And she says that, I'm one of your guardian angels. And I said, well, I wasn't really sure I had one. She said, oh yeah, everyone has at least one guardian angel, and their role is to watch over us while we're, walking the earth, and make sure that we don't suffer an untimely demise. And what she meant by untimely is she said that, all souls, nobody dies by accident. We die when our souls are ready to exit the incarnation.
And what was her name? Anna what?
Anna Peel.
P-E-A-L?
A-N-A.
Yeah.
P-I-E-L.
Anna P-I-E-L.
Anna Peel.
Okay.
Anna Peel.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
And so what happens is that sometimes because of the clash of free wills going on our planet, because every human has free will to act and make decisions, sometimes an event might arise where our physical bodies might suffer a tragic injury or even death before our souls are ready to go. In that case, our guardian angels will step in to intervene to make sure that does not happen. And sometimes it can be just a sort of a strong intuitive flash to tell us to take a different route home or to walk down a different street or do something differently to avoid it. But they can actually physically intervene if necessary to stop us from having an untimely demise. So, for example, she said that if we're traveling to the airport to catch a plane to go somewhere, and they can see that that plane is going to crash, they can actually do something physical like give you a flat tire so you miss your plane. And so they can do physical things like that. And most of the time, people aren't aware of what's happened or that there's been intervention. And they just think, sometimes you miss near death. You think, I'm just lucky. It wasn't luck. They were there.
Really? And can we ask angels to help us with things if we're really in a bad situation? Can we call on them for help?
Absolutely. Yeah, they can, but they won't grant every wish. I mean, they will do it if it's important for our journey. So you can certainly ask them, but for example, you say, "Dear angels, I'd like to win the lottery," they're not going to do that for you.
But if you're doing something and it's very difficult, if you say, "Angels, please help me," there's a chance they could.
They could chance it if they think it's appropriate for you, then they can help you with that. Yeah, so by all means, invoke the guidance and the help from your angels.
Like if you were sitting there writing your book and you thought, I just can't get this together, would you please help me? They probably would, because you're doing something that is constructive for the rest of the folks. Is that how?
Yeah, they probably would, except that I wouldn't be aware of it because when a brilliant thought flashes into my mind, I'll think I just generated it.
Yeah.
But I didn't.
You didn't. You say, well, yeah, that's really too much for me to be thinking like that. Yeah. Now, and then another excursion, I heard that you met a person or an entity named Lucifer. How is this possible when all along you've been told that, when you talked about Satan, the devil, whatever, that does not exist? How does that gel together?
Well, I did in fact meet Lucifer, but Lucifer is not what some of the people over the history have described him as. He's not the fallen angel, the personification of evil. A lot of people have equated Lucifer with Satan. Satan doesn't exist, the devil doesn't exist, but Lucifer did, and he actually turned out to be a very benevolent angel, really a kind-hearted, compassionate angel whose job was not to spread evil, but to stop evil, which is 180 degrees from what some people have ascribed to him. And he said that he's not a fallen angel. He's one of the source's, very hardworking angels, and he spends most of his time trying to stop evil on our planet. He does that by sending strong intuitive messages to people who are about to do something evil to try to stop them or to encourage them to do something positive. So he said, very interestingly, he said, he gave me 3 examples of where he was successful. He said that he sent strong messages to Abraham Lincoln to get him to abolish slavery. So that was one good point. He said that he sent strong messages to the Nazi scientists who were working on developing the A-bomb in World War II for Hitler, sent them strong messages to drag their feet so the bomb was not available to Hitler during the war, which obviously solved a lot of problems. And then in 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and you may remember this, when Russia was trying to build missile launching platforms in Cuba, only 90 miles away from Florida, and President Kennedy said, no, you can't do that, and he circled the island, did a naval blockade so none of the Russian ships could get into Cuba, and everyone was on pins and needles thinking that this was going to be the start of World War III. And,
I remember that well.
Yeah, and Lucifer says he sent strong messages to Nikita Khrushchev, who was the Soviet leader at the time, to get him to back away and not push the button to start World War III. So he says that's three of the things that he did that really made a difference in our world. And he does many other things, but obviously he says because there's still so much violence and crime and evil on our planet that his intervention does not always work, but he still tries hard.
Oh, good. Okay, now we don't have too much time left, and I want to end on a good note here, but one question I wanted to ask you was, you had a frightening encounter with the black hole. A lot of people have heard about the black hole.
Yeah, well, the black hole, as the astronomers tell us, that the black hole usually happens when a star collapses in on itself, and the resulting little mass in the center is so dense that its gravitational pull won't let anything escape, so not even light can escape it, hence the term black hole. So Albert took me there one day, I'm not sure why, and as we went into, there was a black hole in our galaxy, and as we dropped down into it, all of a sudden I experienced something I'd never experienced before, which was like total sensory deprivation. I couldn't see, hear, feel anything, and I had no sense of passing time, and Albert had just seemingly disappeared. I was there all alone, and I sort of started to get panicky. I'm thinking, oh no, Albert has tricked me. He's really brought me to hell, even though he told me that hell doesn't exist, and I wondered, how am I going to get out of here? And then off in the distance, I saw a tiny pinprick of light. As the light moved closer to me, it got larger, and soon it was a big circle of light, which just then engulfed me, and I found myself then in sort of a subatomic world, and I was standing there looking at what appeared to be an atom with a nucleus and electrons revolving around it, and then some invisible force started pushing me away, and I could see there were other atoms that had joined together with this first atom to form a molecule, and as I zoomed away further, these molecules had all joined together to form a shiny black substance. And then as I continued to zoom out, I found myself emerging from the glass eye of a teddy bear sitting on the shelf in my family room. So I'd ended up back in my home. And then Albert was standing beside me, and he said that he had been in the black hole with me, even though he had concealed his presence. He told me I was only there for 30 seconds, so it wasn't any big deal. And he said that he did that just so I could learn what total blackness and total the experience of being totally all alone was like. And because of that, I would now appreciate the light, and I appreciate the company of other people or their souls around me better after having experienced that. And he said that he would never take me there again. And when I said to him, how did I get back here into my home? He said, the space-time continuum is curved in many different ways, and I had come back through an interdimensional wormhole, so from the black hole back to my home in here on Earth. And so it was frightening, but it turned out okay, and Albert assured me that I was never in any danger.
Oh, wow. Well, that's interesting. Now, we only have a few minutes left, so what would you end on, like an enlightening note to give hope to people listening, and what would you say?
Well, I mean, everyone should just realize that who they are and what they're doing on this planet, that they came here by their own choice, that they're eternal souls, and when their physical bodies die, they all go back to the spirit side, which is a lovely place, no matter what they did here. And so they can't get lost, they can't make a wrong turn, they can't go wrong, and so no matter how many mistakes you make or how many wrong turns you make, you're always going to end up back in a wonderful place where you can regroup, look back at what you did in this life, and then plan your next life if you choose to.
But now this doesn't mean people can go out and create havoc and do that. That's not what we're saying, is it?
No, not at all, because it doesn't mean that it's not a free-for-all to go ahead and do evil things, because we're here to sort of to learn about love and compassion and treating other people with respect. And so that's what our souls want, and so that we should follow what our soul's desire is, to have a positive life here on Earth. So no, it's not a free-for-all to go out and commit crimes because it doesn't count. It does count. When you get back to the spirit side, you will feel very awful for what you did, and you'll plan another life to come back and make amends. And so if you don't learn your lessons in this life, you're going to come back and face the same lessons in another life.
So that is the punishment.
Yes, that you come back and face the same lessons. So, you're going to have to balance out your karma at one point or another. And so, it's not a free-for-all to just be an evil person. That's not what you're here for.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I wanted just to stress that, because I believe we need to be the best we can and help as many people as we can. And when we do that really with a really clear heart, I think that's as good as it gets, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think well said, Marie.
And, I want to give just one more time, if you give out your information for our listeners.
Sure. My website is garnetschulhauser.com, or if you Google Dancing on a Stamp or any of my book titles, you can get to my website. Lots of information there about my books. There's buy links to get to my books. And my contact information, email is there. And I'd love to hear comments, questions from your listeners.
Yes, and I want to say thank you to you, Garnet, for coming on twice on the show, and people will enjoy. They can, we'll find a way for them to listen to the other show, so they can listen to both of them, and you'll have them both up on your website. And also, I wanted to say to the folks, some of the things you've shared with me today, I have trouble wrapping my mind around, but I think we all will, because we all have to think what resonates with us and what we feel resonates with us and harmonizes, and take that and make it work. Don't you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yes. And we all have different ways of thinking, and you brought, you said some pretty thought-provoking things, and I think it's great to share with people, and then they make their own decisions, because I think, we're all striving to find the right way and the right path and everything, so we just have to be individual about it and be happy and be thankful for living here. And like Albert says to you, not to take life so hard, to be happy and enjoy life and live in the now and appreciate. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. Well said, Anne-Marie.
Yeah. And so what is your affirmation for the day for the folks?
Just to continue on what you said, is that recognize that your journey here is an adventure. Don't take it so seriously. Laugh lots, smile at everyone. Embrace love and compassion to the extent that you can, and and recognize that everything that happens to you in this journey is a lesson to be learned. So there's something to be learned from the good things and the bad things. That's
very well put. And thank you again, Garnet, for being my guest a couple of weeks in a row. And folks, be sure to keep your emails coming to Anne-Marie Evers at shaw.ca, ANNEMARIE, another EVERS at shaw.ca. And please check out my website, here to help solutions.com, AnneMarieEvers.com, and also my cardsoflife.com, goodness, and then Anne Marie's Angel Chapel. So I've got quite a few websites, and check them out. And also, please check out the books that Garnet has written, and there are 3 of them again: Dancing on a Stamp, Dancing Forever in Spirit, and Dance of Heavenly Bliss. So, folks, we'll see you next week, same time, same station, and God bless. Bye, Garnet. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, bye-bye.
Welcome to the Dr. Anne-Marie Evers Show. The doctor is in the house. Do 2 affirmations and call me in the morning. Change your life one new thought at a time. Make your dreams come true. Attract that lasting, loving relationship. Successful career. Radiant health and abundant wealth. Tune in to the Dr. Anne-Marie Evers Show and learn positive ways to get what you want on www.contacttalkradio.com.